78.3% of people who are in sales did not set out to be in sales when they left school, university, or when they started their career. So I was that typical person. And then I got talking to this guy who I didn't quite realize at the time, but he was selling me on a sales role. He was doing a good sales job on me. And what is possible is quite amazing. You've just got to get in there, almost find the joy of experimenting with it.
Will AI kill SDRs?
Might kill all sales, kill all humans. Look, what's happened to the SDR is that the model wasn't right. I said earlier, the unit economics weren't right on it. We're all having a go, but geez, it's a hot, sweaty mess.
Welcome back to the B2B Sales Blueprint by Firmwall. I'm Paul Perrott, co-founder and co-CEO at Firmwall. Each episode, we talk to operators, founders, revenue leaders about what actually drives B2B growth. The decisions, the experiments, the lessons, the things you've gotten wrong, the things you've gotten right, and really what, I guess, revenue leaders and operators have learnt about the journey about what actually drives high-performing sales teams. So my guest today is Scotty Freeman, co-founder and CEO of Apprento. Really thrilled to be able to do this in person today, Scotty. It's awesome.
Yeah. Thanks, Paul. No, glad to join you.
So for those that don't know, Scotty's one of the most New Zealand's most recognisable voices on the business of B2B sales talent. Not just as a seller, but someone who's spent the better part of a decade I guess trying to fix what you see as a broken system. And with over 20 years experience spanning sales, recruitment, general management, 2 startups, I think, his career is, the raw material for everything that Apprento's been built on. So really excited to actually be able to reconnect after we chatted last year, I think, when you were very gracious in helping us kind of navigate the New Zealand market a little bit. So
yeah, no, not at all. No, it's good to have you over here.
So Scotty, you've built a whole business around fixing what you call a broken sales talent lifecycle. So how did you fall into sales? I remember you say you fell in as a teenager. So why does someone who kind of stumbled into the sales profession, why do you end up dedicating your career to it?
It's a funny one, isn't it? Like most people, in fact, we did a survey, I think 3 or 4 years ago, 78.3% of people who are in sales did not set out to be in sales when they left school, university, or when they started their career. So I was that typical person. I did my studies, which qualified me, I think it was English and business, qualified me to everything and nothing. Yep. I came out, I thought I'd do my OE just to put off trying to get the job. And that was me. I was in England and traveling over this side of the world. And then got back and just thought, right, what am I going to do? I went to all the grad fairs, spoke to the police, the army, applied for the grad programs. My grades weren't quite good enough, but I'd enjoyed university. And then I got talking to this guy who I didn't quite realise at the time, but he was selling me on a sales role. He was doing a good sales job on me. He sort of said, look, so do you want to be in something where you can use your people skills? You can have a day which is full of pace and energy and you're solving problems and you're earning good money. And I was just nodding.
Sounds awesome.
He said, right, well, come along to one of these assessment days. I didn't really know what I was getting into. And then I obviously did okay, and they ended up offering me a job and ended up, in the world of recruitment, which is where I started off in London. So that was a baptism by fire, but the best place to start.
Yeah, there's actually some great sales learnings in recruitment. I think it's
yeah. I mean, it's. I always say it's the hardest sales role because you're selling to people, but you're selling people as a product. And if you sell software or a table, mostly that stuff's going to turn up and do its job. And so the added dimension of people is the bit which keeps it interesting. But I mean, just going back to learned some real basics there of activity. Just my old training director said to me, I don't know whether he was talking to me directly, he said, Scotty, if you're the worst salesperson in the world, as long as you do the activity, you'll be all right. So I've stuck with me ever since.
Awesome. And so before Apprento, you were one of, I guess, 13 people who left the corporate world to co-found Bureau. So that was, I guess most people think of founding a business with 2 or 3 people is a bit complicated. How did 13 of you decide to?
Yeah. Well, we'd all had a good run under what was OCG at the time, and we were bought by Chandler McLeod, and then it was like a game of Russian dolls, and then a big Japanese behemoth recruit group were coming in to buy Chandler's, and we were sort of the free pair of scissors that came with the deal. So we just got this sense, it's one of those, I suppose, those tipping points or sliding doors. What do you do?
Yeah.
And I think there was enough of us that sort of said, well, look, why don't we go and do this ourselves? We know what we're doing. Barriers to entry are pretty low. We don't need much. And I think it was sort of safety in numbers. It was starting a business with some experienced people, so it took away the risk.
Yeah.
And so it was good. What was that? Sort of 5 or 6 years for me. I think the romance of it was great, and then the reality sets in around you got that many shareholders and all want a slightly different view of the world. COVID had happened, so it was just a few different dynamics. And always in the back of my head, I wanted to do my own thing. And I had this idea. I'd seen the problem. I'd seen some solutions overseas and just thought New Zealand was ripe and ready for what we wanted to do.
So tell us about Apprento. So you described it as a sales acceleration platform. So
I think I'm trying not to use the word recruitment because I'm a proud recruiter, but also recruitment for me was just dropping people off and saying goodbye, good luck. And I saw that the fundamental problem with sales is that we didn't have the talent in New Zealand, especially to support the growing tech sector. We sell a lot of logs and milk powder, but not high value stuff. And with technology, if we're selling into international markets, we've got global competitors who are sharp. We've got sophisticated buyers, but we didn't have that talent pool, and we still struggle with it. So I thought, well, we've got to create the talent pool. And I looked overseas, and there were some models which were effectively what the legal and the accounting professions have done for years, is take young people in, give them a pathway, train them, they set qualifications, and off they go. But sales was more like the Wild West. There was no expectation of having to train people. And I just thought, look, we're not going to, we create all these wonderful products, but we're not going to be able to sell them that well unless we start to equip our talent pool, sales talent pool, much better. So that's where the idea became born, is that we started with career starters and career switchers. So, like an apprenticeship model. And then as times evolved, we now help at all levels with sales and go-to-market talent.
And how does that model work? Is it, because I guess you're kind of two sides of the marketplace, I guess. How do you think about kind of, is it, what's the key to kind of making the model work from a...
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what's happening in the economy. But the essence is that we're trying to always balance, have we got enough clients to feed the candidates that we've got, and have we got enough candidates to feed the clients? Are we a candidate short market? So our challenge is particularly in the sales, identifying sales talent. So we've got a bunch of tools and frameworks that we use, 5 Eyes methodology, which we've created ourselves, which allows us to look at the key parts of both inexperienced people with no sales experience, and people with experience, including leaders. So we've got the ability to understand it, but the challenge is always trying to get that balance right. Have we got enough people coming through? And because they're all leaving to go to your country where you're paying them more. And then also just on the other side, who are the clients, who are the companies that we're working with? Because New Zealand's, it's a village. It's not a massive area. So there's some companies which, they're just probably not ready for us. They need to sort out their go-to-market, or at least get some systems processed first. That we can help with some of that. But I mean, it's a balance, but it's been a challenge, particularly last year. There just wasn't an awful lot happening. Yeah,
there was some kind of almost boom years in kind of 21, 22, 23.
Yeah, and we saw that. Everyone was just grabbing talent. It didn't. The unit economics didn't make sense if we look back on it now. It was just like, grab as many SDRs and salespeople as you can and let's go, right? And then we obviously had the pullback, and everyone said, this doesn't work. The SDR is not dead, by the way. It still works in the right model.
I want to come back to that.
We'll come back to that. But
So I'd love to do so you've obviously hired, and been involved in hiring, I suspect literally thousands of candidates. So starting with, and, I'm not alone in, finding sales hiring hard, right? Like it's hard. It's hard to get right. It's hard to do it consistently. So I guess starting with those kind of graduate or those career switchers who don't have a lot of kind of sales experience, I guess, what's your advice? You're talking to a founder, naive founder who's trying to hire what's your advice? Like, where do I start? What do I do? What should I not do?
Yeah.
How should I think about it? What am I looking for?
So, yeah, I mean, and look, we're still learning, and with AI, we've got some tools now which are really interesting that we can pull out a lot more data. But the first thing is be clear on what you actually want. There's a lot of founders and even experienced sales leaders who, when it comes to hiring, they're sort of going, "Hey, I need a salesperson." So, okay, well, let's dig into that. So, what's your sales cycle? Is it long? Is it short?
Yep.
Is it complicated? Do you deal with SMEs or enterprise? We've got to get some basics, because we've got to understand, does that person's, especially for career starters and career switchers, does their what we call the raw capabilities match that particular type of sales environment? Because if they're a slow, deliberate engineering type, maybe they're more suited to a bigger sale with a bit more complexity. But if they're a shuffle on your seat, high energy and less attention to detail, maybe they need to be dealing with the SMB and high volume sales. So, we've got to understand that who we selling to, but then also our own culture, and who's going to fit.
And what do you look for? Say specifically for hiring an SDR, what are the? Because you can't really look for experience. Like, what are you? I guess what are you looking for when you kind of review someone, chat to someone, and then what are the characteristics, and then kind of how do you test those?
Yeah. Firstly, there's got to be a sense of call it warmth, engaging sort of persona. We're trying to grab attention straight away. And so if someone has that naturally and they can take feedback on that, do you get a sense of warmth from it, first of all? Second thing is we're looking for some sign of resilience, because you cannot know until you get into that sort of role that, making a large volume of calls and getting no's or nothing happening, which also then sets you up for a later career in sales. But so we're looking for some sort of resilience. How does that come through? Well, you ask people, you can also look at different things on the CV. What are the part-time roles they've done? Have they run I'm choosing some obvious. Have they run marathons? Have they done a side hustle? Have they had a significant event they've had to get through? So there's a few different sort of indicators and signals that we try and pull out. And then we're also we have assessment sessions. So we run sessions where they turn up virtually, and we put them through their paces, and they won't expect a lot of things that we're putting on them. We start quite kind and just supportive, and then we say, right, now we're going to do this. And we get to see people's reactions under pressure.
So let's unpack that. So kind of what are the sort of things you would throw at someone in that kind of session?
Yeah. Well, so you might get sort of 4 or 5 people who turn up in a session, and we're also giving them information. So we are teaching them about a sales career. So they walk away with something. It's not just an interrogation.
Yeah, so it's give together.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we start off just, hey, we're just going to introduce ourselves and let us know what's your greatest achievement. And you can get from the very ordinary, and completing a degree is fine, but lots of people have done that, through to, I'll never forget this one guy. He said, I set the Guinness Book of World Records for the largest human bomb into a lake. That move where you jump off and everyone bombs into. And I mean, he just stopped, and I said, "You got to tell me more, right?" So straight away, you've got that 1 or 2 sentences, but beneath that, there's so much there.
Yeah.
So you give everyone the same question, and you sort of see what comes out, and then we go through, and then the final exercise is a business case. You're part of a business team working together, and you've got to pitch us on a particular idea. And they get 15 minutes to prepare it, and suddenly we're in a role play, and you see pretty quickly who can work under pressure, work with people, who wants to take on the lead, who doesn't.
Yeah, interesting.
So and then we've got some other DNA profiling tools that we use as well.
And how do you think about raw aptitude? I guess, like, do you do other testing, or do you?
Yeah.
How do you, how important is that? How do you think about that?
Yeah, it is really important. I think my opinion on it has changed since we've started. We've got a partner called Ability Map who help us in this space. We've worked with them from the start. And what we have is a profiling tool which allows us to understand what we call the raw capabilities. So when we're into the working age, we've got a mixture of nature and nurture that's helped shape us. And think of it as the superpowers that we have that we didn't choose. And some of those superpowers lend themselves very well to being in a sales role. Others mean we shouldn't be near a sales role. And so we're trying to identify these capabilities or preferences and motivations, because some people on the surface can appear friendly and chatty. And this is where I think a lot of people fall over when they choose salespeople, because they think, oh, it's the person who can talk the most. When actually, quite often, they are not the person. And so we can get a little bit deeper and we can look underneath the bonnet and go, right, really what is going on here? So if we combine that with what we see in person, we think we've got a really robust way of identifying raw potential.
Okay. And then how do you, so you mentioned before you sound like you started doing a lot of career switches, kind of early stage. How does hiring a more experienced sales rep, because who by nature are good at selling, so they're good at selling themselves, they're good at selling. So how do you, is the process different? Is it the same? How do you think about it?
Yeah. Oh, it's one of the hardest areas. I really do. But the way we think about it is to have robust process around it. And again, it goes back right from that, what are you actually looking for? So we do a lot of work up front with our clients to identify what is the role, what isn't it, who are your clients, what's the call cycle. So some of the basics, and this is where we use our 5 I's framework. Each of the I's stands for a different part of what we're trying to uncover. So the first part is intent. So does this role fit with where this person is at in their career? Does it make sense that they would want to look at this role?
I think people miss that. It needs to be a logical next step for someone. I could not agree with you.
Otherwise, why are you looking at this? And so a lot of people don't dig deep enough. We're too vague. I spoke about this last year at an event. I said we're too vague in sales, both when it comes to questioning clients, but also when we're hiring. So we've got to look at that. And then one of the other I's is impact. So what is the impact they've had? Like, what are the results they've had? How do they go about that? We've got to get into the detail, right? Really unpack it. And then we've got to look at things like sales relevance. So have they sold a similar thing? It doesn't matter if they've sold a similar thing, but has it had a similar cadence? Have they had to set up their own deals? Have they had lovely inbound set for them? How sort of resilient are they? So there's quite a bit that we unpack to look at to give us an assessment of, actually, should this person be spoken to?
And relevance must be, it's hard in Australia. I came from construction tech, and when we started out at Aconex, finding someone who'd sold construction with a tech background was almost unheard of. So, and I can imagine in New Zealand, there's not a deep pool, as we talked about. So how do you trade off relevance for, and you mentioned people who have kind of experience in similar environments. I think that's one of my learnings over the journey, is actually being really thoughtful about what's our environment.
Yeah. And so you've got the relevance to your customer set. So, are we dealing with SMB, enterprise? What's the speed? Can this person get their head around it? Are we comfortable that, yes, we understand the gap there and we know that? But then it's, what is your environment? So are you startup, scale up, mature? What is the pace? Because startup, scale up, that's a pace. And if you've come from a big logo where you can phone up anyone and go, yeah, I'll come get a meeting, that's very different from if you've got a brand or even a problem that's being solved which people aren't that aware of. Right? So I think you've also got to understand, has this person been in environments where they've had to, the word hustle and it's a bit chaotic and we're still figuring some things out. And are they willing to be in that sort of environment? I think it's. I think that's the other thing is a big watch out for.
Yeah, I'm sure both of us have been in lots of conversations where you're talking to a rep and they go, look, I've had a great journey at blah.
Yeah.
Insert big logo, but actually I'm more entrepreneurial at heart. I'd love to come and do something a bit more. And it's
The romance of entrepreneurial and working for a startup, unless you've been through it a couple of times, it'll churn people out. But no, it's hard. It's hard hiring, and especially when you got a small talent pool as well. We've got a number of clients now who, that they started out, they don't want to pay a fee or whatever. Try to do it themselves. 2 cycles, 3 or 4 months later, and they'll finally go, right, okay, can you help us? Like, yeah, but we're not going to have 7 or 8 people on your shortlist. If I can find 1 or 2 here, we've got to act.
And so talk us through How do you, so you've gone through the process, you found a great candidate. How important are reference checks and how do you think about them?
They are really important, and they've got to be done well with the right people. So
so what would be your advice to?
Well, it's not good enough to just have one, and it's your previous boss.
Yeah.
I think we've got to look at it from a number of different angles. But it's also about understanding what happened at that company before at a deep level, so you can ask some challenging questions. And I think a lot of recruiters and hiring managers just get happy ears. You're emotionally wedded to this person. You've almost finished the process.
Well, you want to tick it off the list.
You just want to get it done, right? You want to get it done. And many recruiters, I want to get that fee. I can see that fee happening. But it is... it's crucial, and the gaps should be identified earlier on, so that you're not trying to just whisk through this reference check. But you need to talk to different people at different levels of the company, and at different companies. So certainly more than just one company. Ideally, somebody might have reported into you, or certainly was above you. Absolutely. I mean, you've got to have a direct manager, ideally too, but also potentially a peer. And not mates. And you've got to, this is a skill of the recruiter or the hiring manager, to distinguish between who is sort of a mate versus who is someone who can actually give you some objective comments, but that also is upon the reference taker to better ask the right questions.
Listen for the clues.
And ask difficult questions, So that's a skill in itself.
And so then, one of the things that I know you feel very passionately about is how you support sales reps, in their first 12 months, because we see very high turnover. What's best practice for onboarding, and how do you guys think about that? And what are the kind of the services you look to wrap around that? And what's been your learnings on that journey, I guess?
My learnings is that a lot of companies do it badly or don't really think about it. It's this race to get the person on board. And quite often, the sales leader and others in the team are just that busy that it's actually a time thing. And some it's just a skill thing, which you don't know how to onboard and what do we teach you. Quite often what will happen is, here's all the product knowledge. Yeah. It's like, right, okay, now how do we sync that alongside sales skills and blend those together so we can get going quickly. So the way we think about it is that you need to get some product knowledge first of all. Otherwise there's too much happening to try and slap you with product and sales and let's get going. So start with your product knowledge, but then really take the sales process and just break it down into your component parts and go, right, how do we, depending on what your role is, but if it's an account exec, let's just start with how do you ask questions around the situation or problems and pain, and then let's move on to sort of, impacts and compelling events, and then how are you going to manage deals? So try and break it down. But we haven't got long, have we? We haven't got attention spans. And so the way we think about it is in bite-sized chunks. So we have online modules which people can go into at their own pace, but we set an expectation of the first 3 months is you got to do all this stuff. We have virtual cohorts every couple of weeks where people come along and we deep dive. We run virtual drop-ins every couple of weeks as well. And then people get access to Grow, which is the AI sales tool that we gave birth to a couple of years ago. So there's a lot there, and it's all designed to be bite-sized because people just don't have the attention spans. But from my perspective, a sales leader needs to be holding the people to account to go through a pretty intensive learning practice phase. A lot of it is about practice. We don't see enough practice that salespeople are doing in that first 3 months. Reps just practice asking questions, and there's the tools to do it now.
Yeah, exactly.
This is the thing. You don't need your manager. You don't need a colleague, to plug Grow, but you've got that there. You can use any AI tool pretty much. And
just it's a good transition because I want to get into how AI is shaping the world of sales, but Grow. Well, I'm familiar with it, but tell me a little bit more about it because that feels to me one of the best use cases that probably doesn't get the attention it deserves. So I guess give us a little bit of the history of Grow and the problem it's trying to solve and conceptually how it works.
So it'll be over 2 years now, 2.5 years ago now. Alex, my former business partner in Apprento, we were talking about how do we scale more of the coaching. Like, there's only two of us, and we weren't going to be able to get it to where we wanted. We want to help more people. And sort of about the time when AI was coming in more of a conversation and ChatGPT was surfacing, and we're part of a business owners, entrepreneurs group with Linda Jenkinson, and there's a guy, Alistair McClay, who he just finished his master's in LLM and AI at Cambridge in England, and he'd come back to New Zealand. He'd already done a couple of startups, but he was hungry for a problem to solve. So we'd started talking to him about this, and he said, "Nah, I think we can do this. We can solve this with AI." So that started the journey of this seed of grow, and we sort of got about 10 weeks into it, and Apprento was only about 3 or 4 years old, and then I was looking at this tech startup, and I was like, crikey, this is. So I said to the guy, and the guys were, a bit younger than me and had the ability to get up and go to the US, and so Alistair, Alex, and Dan, 3 sort of co-founders with me as a founding advisor, started to develop this product, and there began the sort of the messy start to what has now become Grow, which I've got to check what the latest description is, but a superhuman sales coach and intelligence tool is probably how we describe it, that sits in your everyday workflow, sits on your meetings, brings you insights on the meetings, the deals, spits up proposals, email, you name it. It's your superhuman sales sidekick, and there'll be a better term they're using at the moment.
Yeah, it's such a. I think the opportunity. I think one of the big unlocks is the opportunity to synthesize call recordings, meeting notes, and then to play that back to reps and say, "Hey, we know in a good deal." These things have to happen. Yep. We know in our sales process that if this doesn't happen, there's something. And the ability for AI tools and grow this, I know, is the ability to synthesize that and to push that up to a manager without a manager having to sit through. It's just an unlock, I think, from a coaching and perspective.
Trying to find out what's happening in deals. It's the old days. You sit there and talk to a rep, and so what is actually happening here? And he wouldn't really know because they're trying to feed you the good story. Good
point.
So this stuff gets served up, via and there's Slack workflow. So Taylor, the coach, you literally go, "Hey, Tay, you tell me what's happening with Paul's deals, which are a risk," and straight away you get it there. Okay, can you work with Paul on stakeholder management and including stakeholders? Yeah, off you go. So, I think what it allows is we as salespeople always want to get rid of that sort of admin-y, busy to and it takes all of that away, and then as a sales leader, you didn't want to be diving into the minutiae detail, right? So now that can all be served up, so we can be I can be a much more impactful sales leader in the right areas that you need, that we know you need, as opposed to trying to guess based on what you.
And one of the things that I get asked a lot is and we come back to how AI is changing the world of the sales rep, but I think the role of the sales leader is getting a lot more complicated, because it feels to me the gap between those that are using the tools available to synthesize information, whether it's for coaching, onboarding, are able to 3 or 4 times their own kind of productivity. Is that something that you see when you're looking at sales leaders?
I absolutely in the US. I think we're still figuring it out here, certainly in New Zealand. If you can get all that information that used to take you. In fact, sometimes you wouldn't do it because it was just a pain, and you'd have to try and spin up certain reports, and or your CRM was too cumbersome to use. So, absolutely, the right sales leaders are getting a lot more. I say a lot more time. I don't think they'd feel like that. They're probably getting to spend more time on the stuff that they want to be spending on, and the reps should feel like they're getting better support. That's I don't know whether we're quite there yet. I think we're still getting the workflows right, and because there's so much you can do with these things. But certainly from what I've seen at Grow and some of the comments that are coming back from both reps and sales leaders is just, geez, this is just saving me so much time and allowing me to understand exactly what I need to focus on.
And have you got any advice for? And I think it's very easy in Australia and New Zealand where you're a bit there's a lot happening over in the US, and I think you constantly have a bit of a sense you're a little bit behind as a sales leader. Yeah. So where do you start? What's your if I'm a slightly weary, time poor sales leader, what's your advice on where to start?
Yeah, I think look, it's got to be a mindset of curiosity to begin with. You've got to go, right. It's not if, it's when. It's like, how quickly can I get my head around this AI world and the tools? So, pick. It's sort of a way I think about it is pick. What's the biggest problem in your sales funnel? Is it top of the funnel? Is it whatever? And then how are you using AI to help you in that part of your sales process? Now, grow hubs, whatever you've got, there will be AI tools associated, but start to understand it. I mean, there's lots of people overseas. I mean, you just got to jump on LinkedIn and look at all the the AI people shouting about it. There's some good people here to follow, and Kiwi SaaS. I'm on the board of Kiwi SaaS. Is doing a better job at trying to bring the community together. So I host a couple of roundtables of sales leaders and CROs, and so we're trying to, bring it together to help each other, because the conclusion I got the other month when we had our CRO get together is that we're all having a go, but geez, it's a hot, sweaty mess.
Yeah. And in a sense, I think it's interesting. We were having a discussion at a board meeting the other day about culturally how you move an organisation, because some organisations are so culturally AI native and others are a very long way away. And I think the good and the challenging news for, I think, CROs is, in a sense, I think it's a function of you in some ways. It's how you personally experiment, it's how you lean in, and it's hard, right, because you're time poor, but we're at this unique moment in time, and I think it's if you're a sales leader, knowing what's possible, I think is the big unlock in some ways.
Yeah,
So.
You've almost got to look at, if you've got people in your network, or even just look at some of the stuff that's available in the US to see, you can see what is possible. Like how you get there is the hard thing, because I mean, this CRO group we had, one of the companies talking through, their AI setup, but to get there and how they've created this highly functioning go-to-market engineering function was messy and had human interventions and stitching stuff together, right? So it's not I think the hardest thing is getting into it and getting through the mess of it to try and get out the other side. But if you're willing to, keep going and persisting with it, there's some big unlocks.
And how does it change the types of reps you're hiring in this new world of AI? Are you hiring differently? Are you looking for something that's different?
And
are the things you're avoiding, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, you'd always say you wanted sort of tech savvy or that's shifted to a whole nother level, right? It's reps who are almost in their own time. What are you experimenting with? ChatGPT, yes, but we've moved on another couple of levels from ChatGPT. We've got one guy who, and it's always, the top performers are always doing this anyway, but we've got one guy, he's been in his role for 3 months. We placed him part of our program, but he's only been in SaaS sales, about 3 months, but he's buried himself into different workflows and using Claude in the right areas, and now he's got Grow. He's like, well, this sort of covers everything, but he was already there experimenting. And so we're certainly looking at the lens of, right, what are you doing, because that's going to unlock your performance.
I was chatting to Luke Williams, who was on the pod a couple of weeks ago, and he said he just really focused on curiosity. So he's really dialed up on curiosity because leads into experimentation, and which kind of is really obvious. He coined, he talks about the term XQ, which I hadn't actually heard before, but I really liked. Yeah. It's just that kind of curiosity, that experimentation kind of mindset.
Yep. Oh, look, there's just so much going on, right? So and what is possible is quite amazing, but you've just got to get in there and almost find the joy of experimenting with it. We're sort of becoming, in some ways, we're becoming like engineers, engineers and software developers, they have their hobbies at the weekend where they, just spin stuff up. That's sort of where we're getting to as salespeople. And we can now because we don't need to be too techies. We've got the tools to be able to do it.
And will AI kill SDRs?
Might kill all salespeople, kill all humans. Look, what's happened to the SDR is that it was the model wasn't right. It was, as I said earlier, the unit economics weren't right on it. So when it got dialed back, companies were looking at, does this make sense? The AR model, the SDR model still makes sense in some areas where there's good product market fit. The CAC is right, the ACV is right. LTV, any other acronyms I can throw in there. So we see it still working, and when there's clarity of ICP, and it's also, AI has taken away, all this. For example, what you guys do at Firmable. No SDR should ever have to be looking at lists and pulling lists together, and so it's making their role more effective in the right companies for sure. So I think the other thing we got to think about, where are young people going to get, if we think sales still is going to be a profession for another, I don't know, for a while, right? Where are people coming into it as well? And where's the feeding ground? Now, that's not a reason just to keep a role open, but I also do think about, perhaps more holistically, how we keeping young talent fresh and getting into sales.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on that. I think that's been our big learning, is the ability to bring in bright young people who want to have a career in sales and get them in the organisation, start to and they kind of develop in their own way, and it's a great talent pool. I think one of our reflections is, in this really crowded world of outreach and actually human to human kind of connection and conversations have become ever important. So our kind of framing around it a little bit is, how do we make the role more efficient? So the salesperson's having more conversations. So that's kind of our framing around it. So let's do the bit that people actually really value, which is the conversation and the connection.
And I think I don't know. Thinking about how do we connect more in person, en masse. I think events, roundtables. Purposely owning a community and using an SDR, in that sort of role. I think there's some variations that we've seen that are quite interesting.
So, been a great conversation. So we're going to close out with a few kind of quick-fire questions. What is one thing that you have fundamentally changed your mind on about the sales profession in the last, kind of couple of years?
That it is... there is far more data and sophistication that we have to help us understand who are the good salespeople. I always felt it was we didn't have as much in our arsenal, and now I think we've got a hell of a lot to give us the insights. I just don't think we're using it to the level we need to.
Okay, very good. What if you were, you speak to a lot of people starting out their journey in sales. What's one bit of advice you would give to them that they may not necessarily want to hear?
Pick up the phone. pick up the phone and phone the sales leader, the head of HR, whoever it is, right? Pick up the phone. It never ceases to amaze me, out of all the hundreds of applications we get on a weekly basis, that I can count on one hand since we started the amount of people who probably phoned me. Right, and so we look for triggers and signals. Anyone phones me, pretty much guaranteed they're going to get to at least the last part of the assessment process.
So there's a tip for you. If you're a candidate with Scotty and you've made it to the end of the podcast, give him a phone call.
Pick up the phone, please.
And final question: Who's one of the who's the most, or the sales leader in your journey who's kind of been most influential to you, and why?
God, that's a great question. I think my first sales leader, guy Mark Lendon, when I was at a recruitment and sales training company in England, and Mark was a couple of years older than me, and he had started out, I think, as an engineer, switched over to sales, and he showed me what it was to really do good quality but high activity. Like, he just I remember this forever saying, activity breeds reward, activity breeds reward. And these were in the days where he just gave me a stack of magazines and said, right, go through those magazines and find the heads of sales or whatever it was. But he would live cold call in front of me. I would listen to him, and he would do these calls, and we would talk about the objections, and I think that's really shaped my approach to sales. I've always, you got to have activity, three parts to it. You got to do enough stuff to the right people and have the right quality about what you do. Simple formula, 3 parts. And, from his perspective, certainly that amount of activity and the quality. So, Mark, and then he went on, he's with a big tech company, Egress, I think, security or software. Anyway, but he's gone on and done great things. But he was certainly influential at that stage.
Excellent. And now it's been awesome chatting. I feel we could chat for ages, but if people, I just love particularly unpacking your kind of experience and your journey around hiring and placing, and so if people want to, get in touch with you to, I guess, have a deeper conversation around that, or want some help in that area, what's the best way to track you down?
Sure. Either just email scotty@apprento.io or find me on LinkedIn. I haven't been as regularly on there as I like, but you will find me. And happily have a chat.
Awesome. Excellent. Great
Hey, Paul.
chat.
Love it. Thank you.
Scotty.
Cheers, mate.